That's
Well,
great. How are you?
hello. I'm good. I'm so busy right now. I'm not sure if you are, but I feel like the world is in a bottleneck and we are scrambling to get shit done.
Absolutely. Always change of circumstances, isn't it, as well?
Oh my God. Yeah, I've been, I think for the last month, October, I think I worked the hardest I've ever worked before. Like I'm pretty like good at taking time off, like taking weekends off, but I honestly didn't take a weekend off all
Oh,
October.
mate.
How about you?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I'm always non-stop. And also, Lauren, if I'm not busy, I'm always busy with stuff that I put myself through. I just always enjoy not doing holidays, not doing days off.
I'm totally the same. I think it takes a pretty highly productive kind of personality to kind of run your own business. I think there's I'm like, if I find myself sitting on the beach on a holiday, I'm like twiddling my thumbs, just thinking to myself, what am I doing? Like sitting on the beach when I could just be doing stuff. Like, I don't know. I just need to. It doesn't matter if it's like an adventurous thing or a productive thing. I just really like doing stuff all the time. You're probably the same.
Absolutely. I'm a big lover of boredom. If I need some ideas, I try and find boredom because then I find escapes and new things come up and there's always that fiery wishful thinking that comes out of it. And as soon
Yeah.
as I get in holiday, I'll bring a notepad or whatever and no computers, no nothing. And I'll just try and, come up with new stuff. And I think it takes me like a few days to kick into holiday mode, but generally I try and, escape. I mean, it's just
Mm.
escapism. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, to everybody who's
strange.
listening right now, I'm just going to introduce you. This is Giulio. He is an incredible embroidery artist. I'm just going to put that title on you because I think it's very well deserving. I think what you make is genuinely art. And yeah, please tell us about what you do and where you're at right now.
Thanks so much. Thanks for the introduction. So yes, I mainly focus on illustration and embroidery, and it's specifically chain stitch embroidery. So for those that don't know, chain stitch embroidery is like it's an old-fashioned technique, and it's all handmade. So you basically are working around the machine, and it's just down to your skills, your patience, and all that to create imagery. And I come from an illustration background, so I studied graphic design, and that's what my direction was. And that's where I applied. I applied just in chain stitch embroidery. Essentially, I focused on a really, really niche market and a niche craft, and I try and work with as many artists, may that be music artists or football players or wrestlers, anyone that's got a spark, and or brands of many kinds, from independent to larger brands.
Yeah, you've made some pieces for some very famous and very like diverse kind of people, from like footballers to like, obviously, like to me the most you know intuitive kind of relationship would be with music, to your work. So a lot of musicians. But yeah, tell me about the most like, diverse kind of customers that you've had.
So I'm generally solution driven. So I enjoy the projects, and I have quite a variety of clients for that reason. I enjoy the freedom of try and focus on the deliverable. What can we do with this particular client? What are these? What it's his circumstances and all that stuff. Um, I mean, it all varies. Some of the stuff would be for a singer, the singer that I'm working with just now is George Ezra. I don't know if you know him. He's quite popular in Australia.
I checked him out. I don't really, I honestly, I listen to mainly like vintage records at home, but I did check him out because I saw him on your feed. Pretty epic, like pretty epic artist. He has this
Thank you.
kind
Yeah,
of
it's great.
like, he has this kind of like, 60s, like he has such a really like big voice. It's quite like interesting to see that voice combined with like pop music. Yeah, totally different.
Absolutely. It's interesting because he's got a good heart, and for some reason, Lauren, I find myself I mean, often, don't get me wrong, not everything that I do, it's a great, sometimes you do a project and it turns out to be okay, solutions, okay, pieces, but maybe the client wasn't necessarily something you carry on. But very, very often I find myself into a situation where I'm clear, see through, I can trust people, they trust me, and we work together. And he's really lovely. He just, we enjoy each other's stuff, and he's great. They approached me straight away, so it's nice and organic, essentially.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's so nice. Actually, I want to explain to everybody that the reason why I hit Giulio up. So this is tied together. So I haven't done a podcast for a minute because I really do this podcast for fun. I don't do it for likes or views or whatever, but I just do it when I'm really inspired. And I saw your post the other day on Instagram, and I like that your posts are also about running a business and sort of behind the scenes of what goes on. And your post was about time management and how valuable time is when you're running your own business, especially when it's a small business or a medium-sized business. Time is so valuable and such a important resource that a lot of people take for granted. And yeah, tell me about, I don't want to go down like a hater route, but I think it's nice to talk about running a fashion business and the do's and the don'ts, the failures that you've come across or the challenges that you've come across. And in this case, it's time. So yeah, tell me about like working with such big clients, with such big teams when you're, one person, and you need to make your pieces yourself, which is a massive time, that goes into it. How do you juggle that balance?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to pick back your point, I'm always keen on transferring this important part of the business, which is running a small business. Is about the fair working ethics. It's about yourself, always making sure that you prioritize yourself and am I doing what I want, not losing yourself within the process, because we all have to pay bills at the end of the month, but there's better ways to do that, and there's ways where you can have a smile at the end of the month as well as being paid. And so I always transfer these to others, and it's a humble way of saying, I'm struggling, but also if you're finding yourself into this situation where you're not on your own, and there is ways that you can, that you can make things better. So like I mentioned to you, I work with small clients, so maybe a person, but I also work with large organizations. I worked with Adidas before. I worked with, I did the collaboration with Playboy as well, and as well as Dr.
Cool.
Martens. Yeah, so very various, clients. There is many types of clients that I won't work with, and that's kind of part of my optic. But working with large clients it's difficult for it's down to time and management, essentially. My point when you saw that video was that I also work with large clients, and the clients, take a lot of time and a lot of logistics around each project. And again, what I do is very, very specific, and like you introduced, it's all handmade. So when you're doing a production, things can take a long time. There's also the design aspect that many of these brands are not involved with necessarily, because I work with marketing teams, for example, and things like that. So they don't necessarily understand how the process works. So I try and break it down for them. But while I'm on my own, or I have an assistant that does a bit here, a bit there, there's always resources that are being used on this side. And on the other side, there's always a team behind it. So I always try and I'm big into failures. So I love failures in a sense that I don't look for them, but if they come, I try and understand how to get by again. And I rationalize, I go back and try to work out systems for not to do it again. And although some of these, you can't just cover them all, I try and be as honest as possible and just say, this is going to take a while. There may be a chance that we've been in a conversation, these might not work because the times need to be tighter. You have to get back to me and all that stuff. Lauren, I've been in projects where the deliverables, I was confident that things were going to be okay and they were going to be great, but there was nobody really that wished to say, okay, yeah, do it. And I took a chance and I did it. And all the pieces went absolutely, immediately. Everyone loved it. The CEO of the company loved it. Everyone loved it. And it's that thing where there's a chain of command and nobody wants to take responsibility. There's a lot of that stuff. I started into punk. That's how I got into this business. I can talk to you a little bit more about that. But my approach is that to treat people as human as possible and try and teach what I do and how I do it to people. And some of these people are in the job because of the progression, but also because of the company mindset. And some of these people just don't understand how the job might be for someone else. So it's good to explain stuff. And I'm big in communication. I just want to make sure that first we get a good relationship with each other, because you might be going to another job or whatever. At least we got a great day. And then second, because it helps me to work together, but also helps the next guy, the next girl that are going to work with them.
Also, everybody just wants to be able to have a happy life and have things go smoothly, and the only way you can do that is to understand each other and just be nice to each other and try your best, right? I have this
100%.
I have a similar approach to things also. I don't make things myself, but I work very closely with artisans who make my things. And a lot of the time these artisans are very small scale, but maybe there's a network of them. So it's also communicating that with bigger stores. In my case, it's bigger stores who, expect me to be able to fulfill a big order, and I have to just say, hey, we can't make things in that quantity, because that's the beauty of having things made artisanally, in your case as well. And I think a big part of it, the beauty of what you do is how handmade it is, and how much artistry makes up what you do. And that's why it's incredible. That's why people want it. But then sometimes you have to spend most of your time communicating that to the world, which is
absolutely pushing the envelope is part of the job. Absolutely. It's been quite a few years that I've been doing these, and in this particular way. And what you said about the brands asking you for much larger quantity is always there. And I found myself shifting from apologetic to, I'm so sorry, I can't do this many, we'll do like that, to a point where I say, how many pieces will I do to make me happy about the project? How many can I do? And I set myself around 30 pieces. So that's the average price, the quantity that I do. And so my answer is essentially I set into limitation, and I set my limitation even tighter because people look for bigger quantities. And that's because it makes me happy. And Lauren, there's something about limited stuff that it makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's total, there's a massive value behind it. There's a conversation aspect, there's a brand value, there is the exclusivity, there is a narrative, there is communication, connection. When people see each other that they've met during an event or they've got that piece, or you create a community. And
Yeah.
I don't even replicate the stuff. I could make more. I could make my own version. I could make multiple, but I just say no. It's just it's a treasure to be enjoyed. You know what I mean? I just try to focus on the good aspect, and where my back is happy, my neck is happy, and my mind is happy. I think that's the place where I like to see it.
I love that. I'm a big believer in this idea that a strong economy is a diverse economy, and that means like a big kind of undercurrent of small to medium businesses that really feed community, that really play a big part of community, and also your large scale businesses and corporations. But definitely the balance is not there at present, and we see a lot of turmoil and kind of market instability as a result of the lack of diversity in our economy. And so my kind of goal in communicating with the world also is to encourage a more diverse economy and encourage people to give things a go. If you have that kind of dream, or if you're interested in doing something, like go for it. Maybe don't quit your day job at the beginning, but I think it's so important. So I'm really interested in how you started your business and what your goals were when you started. Have they changed along the way?
Yeah, so I mean, to tell you a bit more truthfully about how I started my business, I have to go back to my early days of school and all that stuff. I'm neurodivergent, so I have attention deficit disorder. But if you see my work, you will see that attention is not a problem. It's more of a regulation. So I tend to hyper focus and focus on the things that I enjoy and give it its best. And school, for many that had this neurodivergence, has been really hard. In fact, it was almost like a life sentence to me when I was, in my early days. I kept failing. I kept doing this thing where I was, masking the way I felt, always to try and fit in within context, within school and everything else. And so as a result of that, when I finished school, I didn't have much of my own wish. So I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't, I remember teachers used to say, hey, what are you going to do, just after you're going to go to university and stuff. And I just didn't have very much in myself. It was a desert. And I didn't even want to have a birthday because I know it's quite sad, but because I just didn't really explore the wishes. And so I remember, this was a very short explanation because school days were really tough. There was also very traumatic experiences around my family, and we had to move town very often. And I moved school on average about every 1.5 years I was moving school. Wow. So this means that I was kind of left on my own, drifting around schools. And so when I go out, I kind of felt like, in a different town, I just didn't want to be there. I just wanted to go through the whole process for myself. And so I came to London. I used to play punk back then. I was really into punk and the punk aesthetics, and I used to write lyrics and stuff like that. It was all about DIY. It's all about making things yourself. Yeah. Guitar, voice, and many other things, not so well.
Sick.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it was about, connection and about, like-minded people that get together and stuff like that. But there was something about my first initial step that made me focus on the outsiders. I was feeling like an outsider, and I focused on the outsider, and I navigated through every outsider that you can think. May that be organized crime, may that be drug addict or dealers, to criminals, to all sorts. I've known all those situations because I was just trying to understand how other people were. I didn't quite identify myself with any of them. But I don't do drugs, I don't like alcohol and stuff like that. But I developed this eye for outsiders, for what they really want, and for how little they are cared for, and for how little they know each other. And and so that became a connection, and I strengthened through punk. But that was a message that I didn't really like to stick with for long, because it was nice, it was great, but it was also quite negative, and I wanted to be positive. And so I came over here and was homeless very quickly. I lived in the street, ate from skips. I couldn't ask my friends to be staying at their place because I just felt like it was an embarrassment. And I said to myself, I'm just going through this because, not because I'm a failure, but because I want to grow and I want to understand the systems, or how I get a house, how I pay the bills. I want to pay the bills, all these things. And I put myself through this. I found all the grants that I could find. I financed my university, finished university. I studied illustration and graphic design. And I was doing so well that my tutors called me back to teach there. And so I taught there at university. And that's where my progression was. It's quite organic, but I always developed the desire for communication, for people that cared for people that were marginalized and stuff like that. And how I got into embroidery was basically because I liked graphic design a lot. I liked illustration, but I just wanted to be having that connection with people. And there's nothing more immediate than having graphics around the jacket, at the back of the jacket, or, expressing yourself with what you're wearing, essentially.
Yeah, totally. I think like I went to art school myself. I didn't study fashion, and I kind of fell into fashion, let's say. But I honestly feel
Because you
like
did modeling, right, as well?
yeah, I did modeling. I was in the a lot in like, through that I had a big network in advertising and magazines. Then I worked in magazines, and yeah, and then I met Nigel Caborn, and then he thought it was a good idea that I started a clothing business, and 8 years later, here we are. But I think what I discovered was just that clothing is so relatable to not just the niche kind of person that you're imagining your clothes are made for, but they end up being, for so many different kinds of people that you don't expect, which I'm sure you've also experienced as well. And I think that's something so beautiful. There's nothing highbrow about making clothes like art or music, or, you don't have to be educated to appreciate or buy clothes, which is something that's so unexpectedly lovely about making clothes, which I think you can relate to. Yeah. So tell me about how, starting to put, graphics and messages on clothing evolved from there.
So one really important step was that when I was doing my final years in studios, graphic design studios, I used to work with the owner of Wallpaper and Monocle magazine, and his name is Tyler Brule. And he used to have this great approach where he used to approach companies and say, hey, I'd like to work with you, or did you think about this? Did you think about that? Big clients, Cathay Pacific, Toyota, all sorts. And I really loved that wishful thinking. I really loved that approach where you can just approach the client and say, I've got this humble vision for you. If you're interested in my stuff, why don't we work that way? And so this is something that I retain. I retain this attitude with brands as well as individuals. And I work in many ways, but essentially I always try and not impose myself onto a brand or to a person, I try to understand what they're about. And if what they're about is what I can relate to, then it's always the best mix. But I try and understand, read about the company, read about the person, for example, a music artist, and then try and work with them in terms of, graphics and stuff. All the circumstances always change. May that be a PR event, but may that be a jacket that is going to be on the record cover, as well as every single bit of gig that you're going to do in a tour. It's something that for me is important to. What you said was beautiful. You said that something about the surprise of people wearing your stuff. That's also great. And it's something that I explore through a made-to-order aspect. So I do these products that are available on the store, on a web store. You can buy them and use them however you want. I don't even teach you how to stitch them. I just like to know how people use them and how they do it. And occasionally you get this amazing surprise of people that, put it on a shoe or put it on other stuff, and it's great.
Yeah.
And what I love, what I adore in my work is creating a platform for other people to pick on. So I don't necessarily know you, but I enjoy the way you took these, and it's great because you put yourself into these. Other things that I did, for example, with George Ezra, is that I didn't make the jackets available to his fan, but I just wanted to see how its fan would take these further. And there's a lot of fan that just make their own versions, which is great because it comes from a really simple, prescriptive, it's one-off. It's a jacket. It's on the record. I'm going to show you the record actually. It's just here, but
Sick.
People do their own, and it just takes from there, and it's great. And I don't know if that answered some of your question.
That's art, man. That's what art does, I think art just reminds us about something we've forgotten about in our day-to-day life. And I think coming from art school and kind of poo-pooing like things like fashion and things like making garments. I think garments can totally be art and function as art and express like art. And I think it's an incredible tool in that sense that, you don't need to be somebody special or understand a special language or a secret code to like take some kind of meaning from, a garment or a message like that. That's so cool.
Absolutely, because it's quite specific. I mean, embroidery, for my point, embroidery is is a statement, but that statement can be used in so many ways. It could be like a fun patch amongst others, or it could be a nice big lettering with your name. I love mine. I like my name because it's always mispronounced. And it's fun. I just enjoy collecting mispronunciations as well. It's just something that I just, it's a narrative. And again, narratives create connections, and it brings it all together to a.
In that sense, actually, I think you've found peace as not fitting in and as not having your name pronounced well, and for not being part of the crowd, but for just being yourself in your own ways with your own beauties and flaws, which is something that I only just started to come to appreciate in the last few years, definitely, which I think the world has become very monotonous and quite same thanks to the internet. And I think encouraging this kind of behavior is like the best thing for creativity, and for like inspiration to inspire other people as well. It's so clever, it's just inspiring other people to just like make something their own. So cool.
Absolutely. I think it's really fun. Yes.
Yeah.
And I like the way that you, first of all, I didn't mention it, but I love the good old what's her face name. It's amazing. It's amazing. How did that come about?
Well, I have a really good friend. His name's Phil Matarese. I've done a podcast with him, but he is the creator of this HBO cartoon called Animals. And he also loves bumper stickers. So he has a book that's all about, like, he just like made up these really ridiculous bumper stickers and then made it into a book. And it's really rude, but then it becomes really sweet at the end of the book. And he came up with the name Good Old What's Her Face, actually. It was like on one of his lists as like one of his future band names. And he gave it to me because he thought that the idea for the brand was pretty good. So yeah, that's
every time I see the name, I crack up. It's so
big
good.
Shout out to Phil. Like, yeah, that's also, kudos to diversity. It's like exchanging. It's just like vibing on each other and making new ideas from your own experiences is something that is so special. And I think human connection in that sense is so special too. Like, you never know what you're going to come up with when you're brainstorming with people.
100%, Lauren.
Yeah.
And also, as a segue, and I think you'll agree with me, there's too much of safe. So if I go back to the design days were often at my end bit of the design days were kind of conveyed by marketing, by numbers. So you had to do what was right. You had to do what was going to be a good solution. There was much less risk, and now there is much less risk. It's because a lot of designers spend most of their day on Pinterest, spend most of their day on Instagram or TikTok, looking at other people's solutions, and they try and do their own solution. And that's something that just not only bores me to death, but it kind of sends a chill down my spine, because that's not art, that's not design, that's not creativity. It doesn't do anything. What you're doing is that you are looking for numbers, for safety.
Yeah.
And
it's quite rude. I think it's rude. It's really rude.
In what sense?
Well, I think it's stealing. I think you're stealing other people's beautiful creativity that, to me, is something I regard so highly and so special. Maybe for other people, they don't regard creativity in that same kind of way. But I take great offense to it. And I think you're doing yourself a disfavor by kind of copying or taking inspiration, quote unquote, from other people and their current work, because you're not pushing yourself when you do that either.
There's something about copying around, other people's work by brands that I think it needs more explanation or exploration. And I think it's down to company culture. I think it's often about junior people or wherever position is, but they're just being squeezed against the tight deadlines, needing to coming up with ideas. There's also the idea that designers have to look at other designers, prescriptive research to come up with ideas. And there's also this acceptance that kind of, you're a big company, you can do that. It's okay. Someone will sort it out anyway, or nobody's going to find out. It's a whole thing. And I think it's just part of the culture. And it's part of the culture where I think you should get your own culture. Should, meet up, hang out, exactly like you were saying before. Creating a narrative, talking about stuff, laughing about stuff. You can't squeeze these like an orange juice. It's just not going to work out. You have to create an environment where things come out like that.
Yeah.
There's something about myself. So I could do that. I could look on Pinterest and I could find a solution for other stuff. I don't do it. But also I just like to, have a conversation with my client and just see where this leads to. And also there's something about very, very limiting for me which is looking at other designs, because as soon as someone sends me a design, my mind is kind of set within along those parameters. I'd much rather enjoy a vintage market or just go for an exhibition, art exhibition or whatever. I'm a massive fan of vintage markets, and I know that you are too. And it's something that it's about it's not about specific references, it's about the context.
It's so random.
Right? Yeah.
It's so random that you don't know what you're looking for. You go and look, like you go often, and then you don't know what you're gonna, like, your eye is gonna spot, but your eye becomes really good at scanning. And suddenly, like, depending on if it relates to something in your personal life or something I don't know, a conversation you had with somebody else, you pick up this thing and it represents something that you are into right now. It's so random that I think that's why I love vintage shopping, is how random it is. Or not just going to like vintage stores, because they're quite curated often, but flea markets, like junk shops, like garage sales, like whatever. I live in Thailand, so people are really entrepreneurial in terms of like just finding a market, finding stuff and finding a market for it. And that's wonderful. I think I love how entrepreneurial Thai people are, how creative they are, how much they hustle. And as a result, you get some really crazy ideas that mean something really special to whoever created it. And that's what you buy into. You buy into that relationship with the idea and its creator. And you can't get that from Instagram, because you're just taking somebody else's special relationship with an idea. It's not your idea. Yeah.
No, the solution, the final solution might be right, but it's not good for your context. It's not good for your project. It's not going to work out.
Yeah.
It's not going to work out. There's a lot of emptiness around these processes, and unfortunately, I think it's just about time. What you introduced me as with the post that you saw. I think it's all about time. The time needs to be right. You've got to dedicate enough time, and the fairness around the process and the excitement around the process needs to be highlighted.
I think, like, I've only started to, like, this year I did a collaboration. I think that's too specific already. I don't want to make it too specific. I think that working with big companies, I think you said it exactly. Working with big companies, they have very tight deadlines. There is a big hierarchy, a big chain of command where your idea has to pass through so many hands to be approved. So there is also that time constraint, that there really isn't enough time for people to give ideas it's a real justice. And I think that's a structural problem with, big mass product, like making product on such a big scale. I think it's, as a small business owner, you're taking a lot more risk. In some sense, when you're running a business, you're funding it yourself, or you don't have, the stability of a stable income sometimes. But I think when you're working in a big corporation, you're making huge risks because you're producing such high volume of product that if that idea is crap, like, you've just made thousands of crap things that nobody cares about. Yeah, I think that's
also
scary.
a fair point. It's a fair point as well. I mean, you can't they can't have the same mindset that we do.
No.
And in terms of production, they have to be safe and stuff like that. But then again, Lauren, there's two things that I wanted to say. One, as a small business, it's important to understand who you're talking to, because then you can say, okay, I'm doing limited quantities, and it's totally fine. I'm not reaching out the whole wide market. And then the second thing is, which started a little while ago, quite a few years ago, where large brands are working with, independents like us, and they're working because they can't quite shift away from their history, from their, from the, for the fame, essentially. And they need some quick injections of fun, excitement, cultural, just be fairness, diversity and all that stuff, which is great, but also it needs to be considered. As an independent, you have to pay the right attention to it, because what did the brand do? Are they employing you because of your diversity? Why? What can you bring out of it? Are you getting the right money and all that stuff? I think it's really, really important. There's a lot of stuff that just is exciting. It's super exciting to work with a large client, but is it the right client for you? Are they getting the right, are you getting the right attention? Is it the right thing?
Yeah. I think also, I think people aren't stupid, and if they can see a large brand is just kind of doing something for tokenism, people are pretty onto it. So I think like a long-term kind of integrity, I think there needs to be this really like strong integrity underneath all the decision making when you are working in a big brand. And but I think that market forces are a wonderful source of change, because I do see a lot of change in fashion, in race, like with in terms of like diversity in race and gender. When I let me give you a great example. When I was a model, a full-time professional model, I do look more white, but I am, a mixed race person. And in certain markets, like I grew up in Australia, where it was a very at that time when I was full-time model, it was a very white, sort of white market, where if you were, Asian, Black, or mixed race, you were like the support cast. You were never the so main crazy character. And 10 years down the road now, it's a totally different ball game, which is wonderful. Absolutely. Yeah, it's just that as an example is wonderful. It's not to say that everything's perfect now, but it's a pretty short, frame of time that the market has pushed for change, and that's pretty cool, I think.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, in the weekend, I was talking to someone it really shook me up. I don't want to go into detail, but essentially we're talking about how footballers have the rainbow shoelaces and rainbow, rainbow colors. And they were saying, I don't want to see that all the time. And it was difficult because they were not seeing how this is great, this is important because it's normal. People see it and then you relate it. You have to see these things because they are important for others. And if you understand that the whole process about loving someone is not the same, is the same sex or recognizing yourself, then you will understand it too. But normalization, just essentially the more you see things, it's just always great, because then you understand that it's not just one main perspective. It's kind of, I mean, I don't want to throw a bad image to Italy, but one of the reasons why I came over to UK is because there was much more diversity. I was able to see people from any other countries, any other races, and origins, and then basically just see their mindset, to see how they would approach things, see how they cook food, see how they do things. And back home in Italy, it was as much of it more. It's a different place just now, but it's definitely not as close to what London would be. I talk about London because obviously London is much more rich. Wherever you go in Italy, even if you go to Milan or Rome, things are still quite one way, set.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about the metaverse and Web3? I'm taking things into it's on the same subject, but we're going into a totally different direction just because I want to pick your brain. I don't know if you do you have any thoughts about Web3? Do you know what it's about, or should I give you a bit of a lowdown?
Yeah, give me a little bit more, because I've been involved in like possible clients here and there, conversations and stuff like that, and it's all been just quite not so sure. Not so sure if it's the right thing.
So I live in a totally different world. In Asia, people, I think the metaverse, we're all kind of half living in the metaverse, because we all have these kind of online personas or avatars. What we represent as ourselves online is not a truism of who we really are. It's what we want to project who we are onto the web. So in a sense, I think we already live in the metaverse, but I guess, as things progress, as technology progresses, I think we will spend more and more time as our virtual selves online, which is what I call the metaverse. And then there are all these new professions that will come about as we progress into more of a metaverse life. So you could be a metaverse fashion designer, where you design clothes just for avatars. You're not making physical clothes or whatever, but you're making products, and you're rendering a whole universe that's online, basically. And so there's a whole parallel universe of job opportunities, or just opportunities. So that's where we're at with the metaverse. So here in Asia, NFTs are being really pushed in the mainstream culture, really advertised. We, look at K-pop. So K-pop, the K-pop, the J-pop industry, which came before K-pop, they are wonderful examples of mass, big scale record labels, looking for revenue streams both in the real world and in the metaverse. So they have these trading card systems, or point systems, basically, where really diehard fans are trading these very limited NFTs or cards. To the more basically the higher points you have, you get these benefits, you can spend 10 minutes with this K-pop celebrity or whatever. It then translates into the real world. So that's the metaverse. Then Web3 is the next step. So I'm not a super tech person, but from what I understand, I'm quite fascinated about it just conceptually. So Web 1 was your dial-up internet, where you pay an internet company to provide internet services. That was the very first basic interaction with the internet. And Web 2 is when we start to have social media. We start, as the users, we start to create our own content, and we are making our own products as content creators, and our data can be, the content we create, the data we get from it can be used. And so that is us producing something for the internet.
Absolutely.
Then Web 3 is like, from what I understand, it is more blockchain based, and it will be more about taking the power away from these big tech companies like Facebook, like Google, taking that away and making the internet experience more of a, I hope, fair place, but let's see. So that's where we're at with like kind of like early conceptualization of Web3. But yeah, I was just curious if you were like into that at all, or if you had any thoughts about culture. I think this idea of the metaverse and Web3 have a big impact on like culture and how we will become as people, where we're going as people.
100%. I mean, I've been approached by clients to, that worked on esports or things like, live gigs on the metaverse and stuff like that, to create assets, to create things. Yes, I haven't actually done any of those things. I can see how things can progress. I think there's a shift culturally. There's a shift of introversion, and then is kind of a schizophrenic exchange of introversion and extroversion. When people are in their safe spots, where they are in their safe environment, they will choose to be aggressive but still safe, or they'll choose to approach people but still safe. And then at the same time, they want to be very recognized. They've got these avatar explorations of all sorts, and they've got these, their style is very stylized. Everything is stylized. It's interesting. I don't really know where the culture is going to sit. And some of these kind of, it's obviously scary in a way. And I hope it goes to a much more, I don't know if this is necessarily the place where kids want to go as well. Because I'm reading that, for example, Generation Z is kind of, in a way, walking away from internet.
That's so cool.
Where they're trying to just be more close to people. And I think that's, as a designer, based on the conversation that we had, I think that's exciting. Not because I'm an old person, because you create things based on that laughter, based on that visual connection that you have with people. I think it's really important. I think there's more measure in seeing each other alive, live. And
I think finding inspiration from something like the metaverse would be a lot harder. I think it would be a lot harder to find unique ideas, because your world becomes a world rendered by other people's ideas. I don't know. We're getting into like a really really existential. I'm just hitting this wall, because the world we're in now is also rendered by everybody's ideas. But then we have nature, and nature is the non-human force that we cannot control and we did not create. So we have that balance in the real world.
Yeah, that if you are in a too safe or a too stressful environment, you can get out and see nature, and that kind of balances out. It can scare you, it can challenge you and stuff like that. I absolutely love nature, and believe me, Lauren, I grew up on concrete, essentially. I didn't see trees and stuff like that, and I wasn't quite aware. And an
Did you
outdoors
grow up
person.
in the city?
Yes, yeah. And I used to love jumping into like working sites and steal stuff or like see how things like found things. I loved abandoned places and stuff like that, but I didn't know nature. And during lockdown, like many others, I really found myself into this, and now I run every once in a while in the morning, a couple of days a week or 3 times a week. And it's just so great because you listen to the sounds and everything is just peaceful. And I've got a forest nearby me, which is amazing.
Beautiful.
It's such a good thing.
Yeah.
It just really brings you back to what's important. And also just, I think we spoke about boredom, but also the sound of your own head sometimes is great because you can just rationalize stuff. We're overstimulated by a lot of things, and we just focus very much on some of the senses. We don't explore many other senses. And I think making stuff, touching things, getting wet and stuff like that is great because it really it stimulates you in a positive way, I think.
You know what I just thought about? You kept saying safety when we were talking about, the online, the metaverse and your online self, and you can step in and step out of that, and that's very safe because you're hiding behind something really. One thing that I love about nature is how terrifying it is sometimes. Like, so I'm a surfer.
I mean, you
love
surf,
surfing.
yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, I love surfing, but it's like sometimes it's terrifying, but that is so humbling too, to be like reminded that you're not everything. Like sometimes the universe is so much more powerful than you are. So don't be thinking you're too hot shit, when you're at the top of the world, because there are forces much greater. And I think
Absolutely.
sometimes fear pushes you in a good way. Obviously, you don't want to be in a fearful state all the time. That's not good. But yeah, like this, just being in a terrifying situation in nature is very humbling. And also, I think just to push yourself, to continuously push how far you can take yourself, you'd often surprise yourself how far you can go. So that's one thing I really love about nature.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the future.
Yes.
What excites you about the future?
In terms of like my work.
Anything.
Okay, so I think what excites me.
Yeah, what has been grabbing your attention that you're excited about in any aspect of life?
Yeah, I think what excites me is the work that I've done through these years in understanding myself and understanding how people are a little bit more, a bit more focusing on emotional intelligence, just trying to understand how we can connect each other a bit more and stuff like that. That definitely, I think, is working on people. The fact that people talk about mental health, the fact that people talk about ways to get out, I think it's still very, very raw, especially with men. But I think it's exciting because men are so set in stone, and it comes from many, many different patterns, chosen and unchosen patterns before. And I think it's great that men are waking up to that. There's a lot more great things for women as well. And there's a lot more understanding that, there's a lot of things that are not spoken about, medical things, the scientific aspect has not been explored and stuff like that. On my side, or business side, I'm not sure. I'm just having doing a shift. On my side, I'm excited about getting to a place where people recognize my stuff, but it's not a narcissistic thing. It's just about being able to gain that visibility, and being able to have ownership and artistic freedom, call it like that. So, I think the ultimate spot for me would be just for people to understand what I do. And this is happening. I mean, it's happening against, people know what I do. They approach me and they say, we've got this project. I'd like you to take the conceptual side. And, so I work on the design aspect and many different things. I love that because then I'm able to actually see a good view of what's happening, a good view of where the collection or whatever is going. I'm not a fashion designer by any means, but I worked with people like Miles Johnson used to be a LVC, used to be a Levi's, and I did some stuff for Isco before, where we created this capsule collection, and I'm working on a capsule collection for a brand comes from Japan, Iron Heart. It's interesting stuff. Yeah, it's that stuff is great, but again, I want to every once in a while stop back and regard there's something about my process that I think my process and everyone's process that I think is very valuable. It is very important. Is that every once in a while you have to stop and understanding where your heart is and when the numbers are. The numbers often come from a good work that you've done. So you've done that kind of visual complexity. You can see at the back here, there's a more, for example, a design and illustration, a type, and then there's a type of George Ezra. People will want to ask you one or the other. And every once in a while, that interest it's not right, or maybe just dilutes. And I think every once in a while I like to stop and say, where does my heart sit? Do I want to do more new stuff, new crazy things? I think it's just about that dedication. Just always keep in mind that it's not about milking what was right all the time. It's just about trying to come up with unusual things. And that's where I like to sit. I like to sit in a place where I work with an interior designer as well as with a fashion designer or a mill or, things like that. Yeah. I'm project driven. So I enjoy just see how things can be done differently and where can we go from there. I think that's exciting. But people say, is there an ultimate project or an artist you'd like to work with? And I think not really. I think it's about chemistry. I think things happen, and they are happening, and happened before, and I'm okay. I like to just carry on this way.
Sometimes when people ask you like, what's the ideal job or ideal person that you want to meet or work for or whatever, sometimes I think that's a dangerous question, because what happens when you have done that? Then what? I think the unexpected is very exciting and beautiful, and just kind of rolling with it. I think longevity is quite an achievement over, I don't know, fame or... Yeah, to me, having a business and doing your own thing and being able to do it for a long time is massive. I think that's a huge achievement. There are so many factors that play into running your own business that, most people can't manage. So, yeah, massive achievement. Silently massive achievement.
100%. I share this completely. There's something about growth. I think there's a kind of idea that your business has to grow in terms of you got to have a bigger studio, you got to have more staff, you got to have to train people. And I'm always approached by people, especially when I used to do trade shows with these. They would come over and say, have you thought about digital embroidery? I said, of course I thought about digital embroidery. I'm just doing all by hand. But it's not the thing that I like. And it's about growth. And growth sometimes is, I'd rather take some profit, right? I don't want to expand all the time. And I don't want to invest all the time. And I'd like to just enjoy what I do and just carry on the same way. People say, are you going to have other people working with you? That's something I would like. And I've had someone before I learned the craft. I'd like to share this craft a bit more, but I'm okay. This is great. This is great. It doesn't have to be big. I don't need more debts. I don't need to use my credit card. I don't need to buy stuff that I don't have the money for. It's fine.
That's a beautiful way to end this. That was beautiful. I love that.
Thank you. Thanks so much. For many, this is just lunacy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so, but who am I to say? I think that's the best way to live your life, and that is so fulfilling for you, and I understand. I totally get it. Well,
thanks,
thank
Lauren.
you, Giulio.
Thank you so much.
For those who are listening, how can they check out your work?
So I have an Instagram page, which is G_Miglietta, which is without the braids. Oh, by the way, I referenced a little bit the ponytail job.
I appreciate that. As you can see, lately I've gone for a rebranding.
I saw.
But
you got to freshen up every once in a while.
We got to freshen
and then
up.
Absolutely.
I'm also older. Been doing this for a while, so I feel
we're not getting any younger.
We're not getting any younger. We evolve with the punches. I'm not trying to fool myself that I'm forever 20, but the spirit lives on. Well,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for spending the time with me and whoever's listening. And I hope that we can get to hang out in the future in real
Absolutely.
life.
Let's hit some vintage market. Maybe I'll just come by with Claire, with my wife, and we just go nuts, berserk in vintage markets in Thailand.
Please.
I'd love that.
That would be great. All right, everybody.
I'll speak to you soon.
Bye,
Thanks
everybody.
so much. See you later. Bye-bye.